The dust billowed across the horizon, staining the Wyoming sky a murky amber as Victoria Pratt ran with all the breath her lungs could hold. Her chestnut hair had come loose from its pins, whipping wildly against her tear-streaked face as the thundering hoofbeats grew louder behind her. The lynch mob was gaining 15 men with ropes and hatred in their hearts, determined to see her hang before sundown. Victoria stumbled on the uneven ground, her once fine blue dress now torn and caked with mud. Just 22 years old and already branded a murderer, a husband-killer. Nobody would listen to her pleas that Malcolm's death had been an accident. Nobody cared that he'd been beating her for months. In Jackson, Wyoming, in 1878, a dead husband meant a guilty wife, especially when that wife had fired the fatal shot. There she is. A voice bellowed, followed by triumphant whoops that chilled Victoria's blood. Her chest heaved painfully as she crested the hill. The road ahead stretched empty toward the distant mountains, her last hope for escape. But as she forced her weary legs forward, a lone figure appeared in the distance, the silhouette of a man on horseback directly in her path. Victoria slowed, desperation clawing at her throat. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The rider approached at a steady pace, and as he drew closer, she could make out his features beneath a wide-brimmed hat's strong jawline, eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea. He pulled his horse to a stop, blocking the narrow road. The sound of the mob grew louder behind her. "Turn around," the cowboy said, his voice low and steady as he drew his revolver. Victoria froze, her heart sinking. Another man hunting her, another obstacle between her and freedom. "I said turn around," he repeated, his gaze fierce but not unkind. "Get on my horse. Now." She hesitated, confusion momentarily replacing her terror. "They'll hang you without trial, madam. I aim to see that doesn't happen." He extended his hand. "Owen Young at your service. Now please, we haven't much time." The first riders of the lynch party appeared on the hill behind her. With a desperate sob, Victoria grabbed the stranger's outstretched hand and let him pull her onto his horse. "Hold tight," Owen commanded, spurring his mount off the road and into the thick brush just as the first bullets whistled past them. Victoria clung to his solid frame as they tore through the wilderness, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. She didn't know who this man was or why he was helping her. But as they rode deeper into the forest, one thought burned in her mind. This stranger had just saved her life, and she had no idea what he wanted in return. The horse thundered through a shallow creek, sending water spraying in all directions. Owen kept his mount moving at a gallop, zigzagging through the trees with a practiced ease that spoke of someone intimately familiar with the territory. Victoria's arms tightened around his waist, her cheek pressed against his back as she struggled to stay mounted. "We need to cross the river," Owen called over his shoulder. "It'll wash away our trail." Victoria nodded against his back, though she doubted he could feel the gesture. The sound of pursuit had faded, but she knew the men of Jackson were determined. They'd been waiting for an excuse to be rid of her since she'd arrived in town as Malcolm's bride 8 months ago, the outsider, the Eastern girl with her fancy education and strange ideas. The woods thinned, revealing the Snake River churning ahead of them, swollen with spring meltwater. Owen slowed their horse to a walk as they approached the bank. "Can your horse swim that?" Victoria asked, eyeing the rushing current with apprehension. "Samson's crossed worse," Owen replied, patting the horse's neck. "But we need to be careful. Take a deep breath when I say." He guided Samson into the water. The horse snorted nervously as the cold water rose to his chest, then his shoulders. Victoria felt the powerful animal lose contact with the riverbed, and suddenly they were swimming, caught in the current. "Now," Owen shouted, and Victoria sucked in air just before a wave washed over them. The crossing seemed to take forever, the frigid water soaking through her clothes, numbing her skin. Samson fought the current valiantly, his strong legs churning beneath the surface. When they finally reached the opposite bank, Victoria was shivering uncontrollably. Owen dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. Her legs buckled as soon as her feet touched the ground, but his strong hands caught her before she could fall. "You're safe now," he said, his voice gentle. "At least for the moment. Those men won't cross the river until daylight, and by then we'll be long gone." Victoria looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 27 or 28, with dark brown hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. Not classically handsome, but striking, with eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Owen's expression darkened. "I've seen what passes for justice in these parts, heard about what happened with your husband. Figured you deserved better than a rope and a tree." Victoria flinched. "How do you know I didn't kill him?" "Didn't say that," Owen replied, leading Samson away from the river's edge. "Said you deserved better than a lynch mob. Whether you killed Malcolm Pratt or not isn't for them to decide." Victoria followed him, unsure what to say. He didn't know her, yet he'd risked his life to save hers. "Where are we going?" "I have a cabin about 5 miles from here. It's not much, but it's dry and the mob doesn't know about it. We can rest there tonight, figure out our next move come morning." "Our next move," Victoria echoed. "Mr. Young, I'm grateful for your help, but I don't expect those men won't stop looking for you," Owen interrupted. "Not until they've found someone else to hate, and I doubt you'd make it far on your own, begging your pardon." Victoria bristled at his assessment, though she knew he was right. She had no horse, no money, no supplies. Her plans had extended only as far as escaping the hangman's noose. "Besides," he added with the ghost of a smile, "I'm already implicated. Might as well see this through." They walked in silence for a while, leading the tired horse through the forest. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows between the trees. Victoria shivered in her damp clothes, exhaustion making each step more difficult than the last. "Here," Owen said, shrugging out of his coat and draping it over her shoulders. "Can't have you catching your death after all this trouble." The coat smelled of leather, tobacco, and pine, not unpleasant. Victoria pulled it tighter around herself. "Thank you, Mr. Young." "Owen," he corrected. "If we're going to be fugitives together, might as well use first names." A half-hysterical laugh escaped her lips. "Fugitives? I never thought I'd be called that." "What did you think you'd be called, Victoria?" he asked, and the sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Mrs. Malcolm Pratt, respected wife," she said bitterly. "That's what I was promised when I left Philadelphia, a good life in the West with a successful man." Owen was quiet for a moment. Malcolm Pratt was many things. Successful, yes. Good, that's another matter. Victoria glanced at him sharply. "You knew him?" "Everyone in the county knew Malcolm Pratt," Owen said carefully. "He owned half the businesses in Jackson, had the mayor in his pocket, made his fortune in mining and cattle." "And what do you do, Owen?" she asked, changing the subject. She wasn't ready to discuss Malcolm. "I train horses mostly. Do some scouting for the army when they need it. Hunt, trap, whatever keeps food on the table." They crested a small hill, and ahead Victoria could see a clearing with a small cabin nestled against the tree line. Smoke rose from the chimney and a lantern glowed in the window. "Someone's there," she whispered, alarmed. Owen nodded. "My friend Joseph. He watches the place when I'm gone." He let out a distinctive whistle, and after a moment the cabin door opened. A tall Native American man stepped out, raising his hand in greeting. As they approached, Victoria could see that Joseph was older, perhaps 50, with streaks of gray in his long black hair. He wore a mixture of traditional clothing and settler garb, buckskin pants and a cotton shirt. "I see you brought company, Owen," Joseph called, his eyes curious but not judgmental as they took in Victoria's bedraggled appearance. "This is Victoria Pratt," Owen said simply. "She needs sanctuary." Joseph's eyebrows rose. "Malcolm Pratt's widow, the one they're hunting." Victoria tensed, but Joseph merely nodded as if this explained everything. "I'll prepare food," he said, turning back toward the cabin, "and find dry clothes." Inside, the cabin was small but neat. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting warm light over the sparse furnishings: a table with 3 chairs, a bed in one corner, some shelves lined with books and supplies. Bundles of herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with a pleasant, earthy smell. Joseph moved to a trunk near the wall and withdrew some clothing. "These belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to her husband's village," he explained, handing them to Victoria. "They should fit well enough." "Thank you," Victoria said, touched by the unexpected kindness. Owen gestured to a small alcove partitioned by a blanket. "You can change there. I'll see to Samson." When he'd gone outside, Victoria slipped behind the blanket and peeled off her soaked dress. The clothes Joseph had given her, a long cotton skirt and a simple blouse, were plain but clean and dry. She wrung out her hair as best she could, and used a small piece of cloth to wipe the mud from her face. When she emerged, Joseph was stirring something in a pot over the fire that smelled deliciously of rabbit and wild onions. He nodded approvingly at her appearance. "You look more comfortable," he observed. "Sit. Eat soon." Victoria sank gratefully into a chair. Now that she was safe, at least temporarily, the events of the day crashed over her. She had killed a man accidentally, yes, but he was dead by her hand. She had fled justice, become a fugitive, and put a stranger in danger for helping her. The door opened, and Owen returned, bringing the cool night air with him. He'd removed his hat, revealing thick hair that curled slightly at the ends. He hung his gun belt on a peg by the door and joined them at the table. "You should be safe here for tonight," he said. "But we'll need to move on tomorrow. The mob will spread out once they realize we've crossed the river." "Where will we go?" Victoria asked. Owen and Joseph exchanged a glance. "There's a place in the mountains," Owen said carefully. "A hidden valley where Joseph's people sometimes winter. Few white men know of it." Joseph ladled stew into wooden bowls and placed them on the table. "Eat first, plan after." Victoria hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful of stew passed her lips. She ate quickly, the savory broth warming her from the inside out. When she'd finished, she looked up to find both men watching her with something like amusement. "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." Owen's expression hardened. "Malcolm didn't feed you." Victoria set down her spoon. "He was angry. He'd been drinking." A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Finally, Joseph stood, gathering the empty bowls. "I will check the horses," he said, clearly giving them privacy. When the door closed behind him, Owen leaned forward. "Victoria, I need to know what happened. All of it." She stared into the fire, gathering her courage. "Malcolm was not the man he pretended to be when he courted me in Philadelphia. He was charming there, generous. My father had died, leaving only debts. Malcolm seemed like salvation, wealthy, established, promising me a good life in Wyoming." She twisted her hands in her lap. "The change came gradually after we married. First, he controlled the money, then who I could speak to. He didn't like me reading or expressing opinions. When I displeased him, he would punish me." Owen's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "Yesterday, he came home drunk, angrier than I'd ever seen him. Said he'd heard I'd been talking to the mercantile owner's wife about returning east. It wasn't true, I'd only mentioned missing my mother, but he wouldn't listen. He hit me, worse than before. Said he'd teach me my place. Victoria took a shuddering breath. He kept his revolver in a drawer by the bed. I only meant to frighten him, to make him stop. When I pulled it out, he lunged at me, and it just went off. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't mean to kill him. But when I saw what I'd done, I knew no one would believe me. Malcolm was respected in town. I was just his difficult Eastern wife, so I ran. And then the men came after me. Owen reached across the table and took her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "I believe you," he said simply. Victoria looked up, surprised. "You do?" "Malcolm Pratt was known for his temper long before you arrived," Owen said grimly. "There were rumors about his first wife's accident, nothing proven, but people talked. When he returned from Philadelphia with a young, educated bride, most figured it wouldn't end well." "Then why didn't anyone warn me?" Victoria asked, anger flaring through her grief. "Why didn't anyone help?" "Because Malcolm owned this town," Owen said bitterly. "Those men hunting you. Most work for him in some way. The ones who don't are afraid of crossing the Pratt name." "Then why are you helping me?" Victoria whispered. "What do you have against Malcolm Pratt?" Owen's eyes darkened, and he withdrew his hand from hers. "That's a longer story for another time. You should rest now. Take the bed, Joseph, and I will sleep by the fire." Victoria wanted to press him, but exhaustion was pulling at her limbs. She nodded, moving to the simple bed in the corner. As she lay down, pulling the woolen blanket over herself, she watched Owen through half-closed eyes. He sat at the table, cleaning his revolver by the firelight, his face set in grim concentration. Whatever his reasons for helping her, Victoria was grateful. For the first time since she'd pulled that trigger, she allowed herself to hope that she might survive. Dawn broke over the mountains with a pale golden light that filtered through the cabin's single window. Victoria woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then the memories crashed over her: Malcolm, the gunshot, the flight, the mob, the stranger who had saved her. She sat up, wincing at her stiff muscles. Owen was already awake, packing supplies into saddlebags. Joseph was nowhere to be seen. "Good morning," Owen said when he noticed her stirring. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," Victoria replied. "Thanks to you." "We need to move soon," he said, businesslike. "Joseph left before first light to scout. He'll meet us in the valley." Victoria rose and straightened her borrowed clothes as best she could. "What's the plan?" "We ride north into the mountains. The terrain is difficult. The mob won't follow easily, especially if they can't pick up our trail. Once we reach the valley, we can rest, decide what to do next." He handed her a strip of dried meat and a hunk of bread. "Eat quickly. We leave in 10 minutes. Victoria chewed the tough jerky, watching Owen move efficiently around the cabin, gathering only essentials. There was something methodical about him, as if he'd done this before, fled, hidden, survived. "Have you always lived out here?" she asked. Owen paused, considering her question. "Most of my life. Came west with my father after the war. He died of fever our second winter. I was 16. Joseph's people found me, took me in for a time, taught me how to live in this country." "And now you help women accused of murder?" Victoria asked, attempting a weak joke. The corner of Owen's mouth twitched. "First time for everything." He handed her a worn leather coat. "This should fit better than mine. The mountains get cold, even in spring." As she slipped it on, Victoria noticed a folded paper fall from one of the pockets. She bent to retrieve it, a faded photograph of a young woman with a serious expression, dark hair framing a delicate face. Owen snatched it from her hand, his expression suddenly guarded. "We should go," he said, tucking the photograph carefully into his shirt pocket. Victoria didn't press, but as they left the cabin and mounted Samson, she wondered about the woman in the picture. A wife, a sweetheart. Whoever she was, Owen's reaction made it clear the wound was still fresh. They rode north, the horse picking its way carefully through increasingly rugged terrain. Victoria sat behind Owen, her arms around his waist. Despite the circumstances, she found herself noticing the strength in his back, the way his shoulders moved as he guided the horse over difficult passages. By midday, they had climbed well into the mountains. Owen stopped at a small stream to rest Samson and refill their water skins. "How much farther?" Victoria asked, stretching her legs. "We should reach the valley by nightfall if we keep a steady pace," Owen replied, scanning the horizon behind them. "No sign of pursuit yet, but we can't get complacent." Victoria knelt by the stream, splashing cold water on her face. "Tell me about this valley. Why is it safe?" Owen joined her by the water's edge. It's surrounded by cliffs on 3 sides with only one narrow pass-in. Easy to defend, easy to hide. Joseph's tribe used it as a winter camp in the old days before the reservation. These days, only a few of the elders remember it. And the army doesn't know about it. No, and I'd like to keep it that way. Owen's tone made it clear this wasn't just about her situation. Victoria studied his profile. "You're not just a horse trainer, are you?" Owen met her gaze, something unreadable in his eyes. "I've worn many hats, Victoria. Not all of them sit easily." Before she could question him further, a distant sound caught their attention. Horses, moving quickly through the forest below. "They found our trail," Owen said grimly, pulling Victoria to her feet. "We need to move. Now." They scrambled back to Samson, and Owen urged the horse up a steep incline that Victoria would have thought impassable. She clung to him as branches whipped past them, scratching her face and arms. "There's a cliff face ahead," Owen explained as they rode. "It runs for miles. There's only one pass through, and it's easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for." The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as they climbed higher, but Victoria took no comfort in it. These men had tracked them across a river and into the wilderness. They wouldn't give up easily. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous. In places, the trail was so narrow that Victoria could see straight down hundreds of feet to the valley floor. She closed her eyes and pressed her face against Owen's back, focusing on the steady rhythm of his breathing rather than the dizzying drop. Late in the afternoon, they reached what appeared to be a solid wall of rock. Owen dismounted and helped Victoria down, leading Samson to a seemingly unremarkable section of the cliff face. "Here," he said, guiding her toward what she now saw was a narrow fissure in the rock, barely wide enough for a horse to pass through. "Watch your step." They squeezed through the opening, leading Samson carefully over the uneven ground. The passageway twisted through the rock, sometimes so narrow that Victoria had to turn sideways to pass through. Just when she thought it would never end, the walls suddenly opened out, revealing a sight that took her breath away. Before them stretched a hidden valley, perhaps 3 miles long and half as wide, sheltered by towering cliffs on all sides. A clear stream meandered through meadows dotted with spring wildflowers. A small herd of elk grazed peacefully in the distance, and hawks circled lazily overhead. "It's beautiful," Victoria whispered, momentarily forgetting their desperate circumstances. Owen nodded, a rare smile softening his features. One of the few places left where a person can disappear. They made their way down into the valley. Near the far end, Victoria could see smoke rising from a small campfire. As they approached, Joseph stood to greet them, looking relieved. "I was beginning to worry," he said. "You are being followed. 8 men about 2 hours behind you." Owen's expression darkened. "Did they find the pass?" "Not yet. They are searching the base of the cliff, but they have a tracker with them, Thomas Green. Owen cursed under his breath. Green's good, he might find the entrance. Joseph nodded grimly. I have prepared defenses just in case. While Owen took Samson to a small corral near a crude shelter, Joseph showed Victoria the camp he had set up: a canvas tent, a fire pit with a pot of stew bubbling, and several weapons laid out on a blanket. You were expecting trouble, Victoria observed. Joseph gave her an appraising look. Owen does not risk himself for small matters. If he believes you are worth saving, then I believe it too. You've known him a long time, since he was a boy becoming a man. He came to my people lost, angry. We taught him our ways, how to live with the land, not against it. Joseph stirred the stew. He has a good heart, but it has been tested. Victoria thought of the photograph. The woman in the picture, who is she? Joseph's expression grew somber. That is not my story to tell. Owen returned, and they ate a silent meal as darkness fell over the valley. The stew was hearty, with chunks of venison and wild onions, but Victoria barely tasted it, her mind preoccupied with thoughts of the men hunting them. What happens if they find us? She finally asked. Owen exchanged a glance with Joseph. We have the advantage here. We know the terrain, have the high ground, but I'd rather avoid a fight if possible. And if it's not possible? Owen's hand moved unconsciously to his revolver. Then we do what we must. Victoria shivered, not from the cold. I never meant for anyone to die because of me. Malcolm Pratt died because of his own cruelty, Owen said firmly. And any man who rides with a lynch mob has already decided what kind of man he is. Joseph stood suddenly, his head tilted as if listening. Someone's coming through the pass. Owen was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. How many? Just one, I think, moving carefully. Stay here, Owen told Victoria, then he and Joseph melted into the darkness like shadows. Victoria sat alone by the fire, her heart pounding. After what seemed like an eternity, she heard voices approaching Owen and Joseph and a third person. They emerged from the darkness leading a young man with his hands bound behind his back. He was perhaps 20, with sandy hair and a face still spotted with acne. He looked terrified. Found him scouting the pass, Owen explained. Says his name is Billy Jenkins, works at the livery in Jackson. Victoria recognized him. He had sometimes cared for Malcolm's horses. The boy's eyes widened when he saw her. Mrs. Pratt, he stammered. They said you killed Mr. Pratt and ran. It was an accident, Victoria said quietly. He was going to hurt me. Billy looked away, uncomfortable. Mr. Green figured you'd head for the mountains. He sent me ahead to scout while they made camp. How many in your party? Owen demanded. 8, including me, Billy replied. Mr. Green, Sheriff Hobbs, and some of Mr. Pratt's men from the ranch. Victoria's stomach dropped. The sheriff is with them. Then it's an official posse, not just a lynch mob. Owen shook his head. Sheriff Hobbs does what he's paid to do. Malcolm Pratt bought his badge years ago. What do we do with him? Joseph asked, nodding toward Billy. Owen considered the young man. We can't let him go back to tell them about the pass, and I won't kill an unarmed boy. I won't tell them nothing, mister, I swear, Billy pleaded. I didn't even want to come. Mr. Green said I had to or I'd lose my job at the livery. Victoria approached the young man. Billy, did you know Malcolm well? Did you ever see how he treated me? Billy shuffled his feet. Everyone knew Mr. Pratt had a temper, madam, especially when he drank. I saw the bruises on your arms once when you came to get your mare. Didn't seem right, but it wasn't my place to say nothing. Victoria turned to Owen. He's telling the truth. He was always kind to me, even when others in town weren't. Owen studied the boy, then made a decision. We'll keep him here until we're ready to move on. Then we'll leave him with enough supplies to get back to Jackson. And if he betrays us? Joseph asked. Owen's expression hardened. Then I'll find him. The threat hung in the air. Billy nodded frantically. I won't say nothing, I promise. They set up a makeshift guard rotation, with Joseph taking the first watch at the pass while Owen secured Billy in the small shelter. Victoria retreated to the tent, exhaustion finally overtaking her fear. She was nearly asleep when the canvas flap opened and Owen entered with a blanket. Thought you might need this, he said, laying it beside her. Nights get cold up here. Thank you. Victoria hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering her. What will happen to Billy if the others find the pass? Owen's face was grim in the dim light. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. He turned to leave, but Victoria caught his sleeve. Wait, please. I don't want to be alone right now. Owen stood very still, looking down at her hand on his arm. For a moment Victoria thought he would pull away. Then with a sigh he sat down beside her. I'm not good company, he warned. You saved my life, Victoria replied. That's company enough. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the valley, the gentle rush of the stream, the occasional call of an owl. Who is she? Victoria finally asked. The woman in the photograph. Owen stiffened. You should rest, please. I've told you my story. I'd like to know yours. He was quiet for so long that Victoria thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he withdrew the photograph from his pocket. Her name was Catherine, he said, his voice low. She was my wife. Victoria looked at the photograph again, noting the woman's serene expression, the simple dress, the way she held herself with quiet dignity. She was beautiful, Victoria said softly. Owen nodded. We met in Denver. Her father was a doctor, mine a failed prospector. We had no business being together, but somehow she saw something in me worth loving. He traced the edge of the photograph with his thumb. We came to Wyoming to start fresh. I had some savings, bought land, started breeding horses. For 2 years, everything was perfect. Victoria could hear the pain building in his voice. What happened? Malcolm Pratt happened. The words came out like venom. My land bordered his ranch. He wanted it, said he needed the water rights. I refused to sell. Then Catherine got sick. Needed medicine, a doctor. I went to town to telegraph her father, and while I was gone, Pratt's men came. Owen's hands clenched into fists. They burned my house with Catherine inside. Claimed it was an accident, a wildfire that got out of control. By the time I got back, there was nothing left. Nothing but ash. Victoria felt sick. Owen, I'm so sorry. The sheriff wouldn't investigate. The judge wouldn't hear my case. Within a month, Pratt had acquired my land through some legal maneuver I didn't understand. Owen's voice was flat now, emotionless. I wanted to kill him. Planned to. But Joseph convinced me it wouldn't bring Catherine back. Said it would only destroy what was left of me. So you've been living out here all this time? Owen nodded. Training horses, doing odd jobs, watching Pratt grow richer, more powerful, waiting. For what? His eyes met hers, intense in the darkness. I don't know, justice maybe, or just a sign that the world isn't as corrupt as it seems. Victoria realized with sudden clarity why he had helped her. And then you heard about me. When news spread that Malcolm Pratt was dead, shot by his own wife. A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. It felt like Catherine had somehow reached out from beyond and balanced the scales. Victoria reached out, covering his hand with hers. I wish I could say I did it for all the people he hurt, but I was only thinking of myself. That's enough, Owen said. You survived. That's what matters. Something passed between them in that moment, a shared understanding, a connection forged through mutual pain and loss. Victoria found herself leaning closer, drawn by a sudden, powerful need for human comfort. Owen tensed, then gently pulled away. You should sleep, he said, his voice rough. Tomorrow will be difficult. He left the tent before Victoria could respond, leaving her alone with the weight of his story and the unexpected ache of his rejection. Morning came with shouts of alarm. Victoria bolted from the tent to find Owen and Joseph running toward the pass, weapons drawn. She followed, heart pounding. At the narrow entrance to the valley, Billy Jenkins lay unconscious, blood seeping from a wound on his head. Beyond him, Victoria could hear men's voices growing closer. "They found the pass," Owen said grimly, checking Billy's pulse. "He's alive, but they hit him hard." "He must have tried to lead them away," Joseph observed. "Brave, foolish boy." Owen dragged Billy behind a large boulder, then took position with his rifle. "Victoria, get back to camp. If this goes badly, take Samson and ride east through the valley. There's another way out, smaller, harder to find." "I won't leave you," Victoria protested. "This isn't a debate," Owen snapped. "I didn't save you from a lynch mob just to watch you get shot. Go. Now." Victoria retreated, but only as far as the nearest stand of trees. From there, she watched as 4 men cautiously entered the valley, guns drawn. She recognized Sheriff Hobbs by his star, and beside him, a lean man with a hawk-like face who she guessed must be Thomas Green. "Young." Green called out. "We know you're here. The boy told us everything before we shut him up." Owen's voice rang out from behind his cover. "That's a lie, Green. Billy didn't say a word to you. If he had, you wouldn't be walking into an ambush." "There's 8 of us and 2 of you," the sheriff shouted. "Be reasonable. Hand over the woman and we'll let you walk away." "Like you let Catherine Young walk away," Owen replied, his voice cold. "I don't make deals with murderers, Hobbs." A shot cracked the air, and one of the posse men clutched his arm, dropping his rifle. Joseph had fired from his hidden position on the cliff face. "Next one goes through your heart, Sheriff," Owen called. "Take your men and leave. This isn't worth dying for." The standoff stretched for what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, Sheriff Hobbs lowered his gun. "This isn't over, Young," he said. "That woman killed Malcolm Pratt. The law will have its say." "The law?" Owen's laugh was bitter. "Since when has the law in Jackson been anything but Malcolm Pratt's puppet? Go home, Hobbs. Tell your men Pratt's widow disappeared into the mountains. No one would blame you for failing to find her in this wilderness." The sheriff hesitated, then signaled his men to retreat. They backed slowly out of the pass, dragging their wounded companion. Victoria didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until they disappeared from view. She sagged against a tree, relief flooding through her. Owen approached, his rifle still ready. "They won't give up that easily. Green especially, he's being paid to bring you back, dead or alive." "What do we do now?" "We move," Owen said decisively. "They'll be back with more men. We need to be gone before then." By midday, they had packed their meager supplies and tended to Billy, who had regained consciousness but was groggy and confused. Joseph had determined his skull wasn't fractured, but he needed rest. "I can't ride with you," Billy said, wincing as Joseph bandaged his head. "They'll just follow us again." "We're not leaving you here alone," Victoria insisted. Owen had been silent, deep in thought. Now he turned to Joseph. "Take Billy to your cousin's place on the reservation. He'll be safe there until he heals." Joseph nodded. "And you?" "Victoria and I will head north into the high country. Make it look like we're trying for Montana territory. Then we'll double back, head west instead." Victoria looked between the 2 men. "What's west?" "California," Owen said simply. "A fresh start." The plan was set in motion quickly. Joseph and Billy would take one horse, heading east toward the reservation, creating an obvious trail. Owen and Victoria would ride Samson north, but only for a day before changing direction. As they prepared to part ways, Joseph took Victoria aside. "He has carried his grief like a stone for 3 years," the older man said quietly. Perhaps now he can set it down. Victoria glanced at Owen, securing the last of their supplies to Samson's saddle. I'm just a fugitive he's helping. Joseph's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. A man does not risk everything for just anything. Victoria Pratt. They separated at the eastern end of the valley, Joseph and Billy heading down a steep trail while Owen and Victoria climbed higher into the mountains. The plan was for them to rendezvous in 2 weeks at a trading post near the Idaho border, assuming all went well. As Victoria and Owen rode, the terrain grew increasingly rugged. Snow still clung to the shadowed slopes even in late spring, and the air grew thin and crisp. They spoke little, conserving their energy for the difficult journey. By nightfall, they had reached a small plateau with enough shelter for a modest camp. Owen built a small, nearly smokeless fire while Victoria prepared a simple meal from their provisions. You think they followed Joseph? Victoria asked as they ate. Owen shook his head. Green's too smart for that. He'll have split his men, sent some after Joseph, and kept the rest to search for us. But we've got a good lead, and by tomorrow our trail will be cold. Victoria huddled closer to the fire, the mountain night bringing a bone-deep chill. Will we really go to California? Owen stared into the flames. It's as good a place as any to disappear. Big country, lots of people coming and going. A widow and a horse trainer wouldn't draw much attention. Is that what we'll be? Victoria asked carefully. A widow and a horse trainer. Owen's eyes met hers across the fire. What else would we be? The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Victoria thought of how their lives had become entangled in the span of just a few days, bound together by violence, grief, and a desperate bid for freedom. I don't know, she admitted. I never planned beyond escaping the noose. I certainly never imagined meeting someone like you. Someone who lives in the wilderness and has a price on his head, Owen asked wryly. Someone who would risk everything for a stranger, Victoria corrected. Someone who understands what it means to be trapped, to have to fight your way free. Owen was silent for a long moment. When Catherine died, I thought that part of me died too, the part that cared about anything beyond survival. Then I heard about you, running from men who wanted to hang you for daring to defend yourself, and something woke up. He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. I told myself I was balancing the scales, getting justice for Catherine by saving Malcolm Pratt's wife. But it was more than that. It was about not letting them win again, not letting them destroy another life just because they could. Victoria moved around the fire to sit beside him. And now? Why are you still helping me? You could have left me in the valley, gone your own way. Could I? Owen asked softly. His hand found hers in the darkness, calloused fingers intertwining with her own. I'm not sure that's true anymore. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile as frost. Victoria's heart beat faster as Owen's face turned toward hers, his eyes reflecting the firelight. This time, when she leaned closer, he didn't pull away. Their first kiss was gentle, hesitant, two damaged souls testing unfamiliar waters. Then Owen's hand came up to cradle her face, and something broke loose inside Victoria. She pressed closer, deepening the kiss, pouring 3 years of loneliness and fear and longing into this one moment of connection. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. Owen rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. This is madness, he whispered. We barely know each other. I know enough, Victoria replied. I know you're a good man in a world with too few of them. I know you've suffered and survived. I know I feel more alive with you than I ever did in 8 months of marriage. Owen opened his eyes, studying her face as if memorizing it. If we do this, if we go to California together, it won't be easy. We'll always be looking over our shoulders. I don't need easy, Victoria said. I just need real. They spent the night wrapped in blankets in each other's arms, finding comfort and a surprising joy in their newfound closeness. For the first time since Malcolm's death, Victoria slept deeply, without nightmares. Dawn brought renewed purpose. They packed efficiently and continued north, climbing higher into the mountains. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast wilderness stretching toward the horizon. "We'll follow this ridge west," Owen explained. "It's harder going, but we'll leave less of a trail." For 3 days they traveled this way, moving cautiously, always watchful. They established a rhythm, riding when the terrain allowed, walking when it grew too treacherous for Samson to carry them both. At night, they made small camps in sheltered spots, sharing stories of their lives before fate had thrown them together. Victoria told Owen about her childhood in Philadelphia, her father's failed investments, her mother's death from influenza when Victoria was 16. Owen spoke of his years with Joseph's people, learning their ways, and his dreams for the horse ranch he'd built and lost. On the 4th day, as they descended from the high country toward more hospitable terrain, Owen grew increasingly alert, frequently stopping to scan their back trail. "What is it?" Victoria finally asked. "Not sure," he admitted. "Just a feeling. We're being followed." They pushed on more quickly, abandoning the ridge for a series of narrow valleys that offered more cover. By nightfall, Owen's tension had infected Victoria, and they made camp without a fire, eating cold provisions and speaking in whispers. In the darkest hour before dawn, Victoria woke to Owen's hand over her mouth. His eyes were wide with alarm, and he gestured for silence. Then she heard the soft scrape of boots on stone, not far from their camp. Owen drew his revolver, motioning for Victoria to stay down. He crept toward the sound, disappearing into the darkness. Victoria held her breath, straining to hear. There was a sudden shout, followed by the crack of a gunshot. Then silence. She grabbed the knife Owen had left her and moved toward the trees, her heart pounding. Another shot rang out, and then the sound of a struggle, men fighting hand to hand. "Owen!" she called, unable to contain her fear any longer. "Run!" His voice came from somewhere to her left. "Victoria, run! Take Samson and go!" Instead, Victoria moved toward his voice, knife clutched in her trembling hand. She could make out 2 figures grappling on the ground, one atop the other. As she approached, moonlight revealed Thomas Green pinning Owen down, a knife raised to strike. Without thinking, Victoria lunged forward, driving her blade into Green's shoulder. The tracker howled in pain, rolling away from Owen. In an instant, Owen was on his feet, pistol trained on the wounded man. "How many with you?" Owen demanded. Green spat blood. "Just me. The others gave up, went back to Jackson, but Pratt's brother offered a reward for her, dead or alive." Victoria felt cold all over. She hadn't known Malcolm had a brother. Owen checked Green for other weapons, then bound his hands with a leather strap. "You rode a long way for nothing, Green. You won't be collecting any reward." "You going to kill me?" Green asked, his voice surprisingly steady. Owen considered him for a long moment. "No, but I'm not letting you follow us either." They spent the remainder of the night guarding Green. At first light, Owen led them to a small stream where Green's horse was tethered. The tracker's supplies were still in his saddlebags, including a wanted poster with Victoria's face crudely sketched beneath the words, "Wanted for murder, $500 reward." Owen removed Green's boots and emptied his canteen, leaving him just enough water for a day. "Your horse knows the way home," he told Green as they prepared to leave. "If you start walking now, you might catch up to him before you die of thirst." "This isn't over, Young," Green said through gritted teeth. "Pratt money has a long reach." "Maybe so," Owen replied. but not long enough to find us where we're going. They rode hard that day, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Green. By nightfall, they had crossed into Idaho territory, the mountains giving way to rolling hills covered in pine forest. "Do you think he'll come after us again?" Victoria asked as they made camp. Owen shook his head. "Not anytime soon. Without boots, it'll take him days to get back to civilization. By then, we'll be long gone." "But Malcolm's brother, Robert Pratt," Owen nodded. "He's worse than Malcolm in some ways, more calculating. But he's based in Denver. By the time word reaches him that we've been spotted, we'll be in California." Victoria wasn't entirely convinced. What if he never stops looking? What if we're never truly safe? Owen took her hands in his. "Then we'll keep moving, together, as long as it takes." The promise in his words warmed her more than any fire could. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I never thought I'd say this," she admitted, "but I'm grateful for the path that led me here. To you." Owen's arms tightened around her. "I spent 3 years hating Malcolm Pratt for what he took from me. Never imagined I'd end up thanking him for leading me to you." Their journey continued westward, skirting settlements and keeping to the wilderness when possible. They crossed into Oregon territory, following the Snake River Valley toward the distant promise of California. 2 weeks after their encounter with Green, they reached the trading post where they had arranged to meet Joseph. To their relief, he was waiting for them, along with a fully recovered Billy Jenkins. "The boy has decided to make a new start," Joseph explained as they shared a meal in the back room of the trading post. "He will come with me to my cousin's village for now." Billy nodded eagerly. "Can't go back to Jackson. Sheriff Hobbs would arrest me sure as shooting for helping you folks escape." "What about the posse?" Owen asked. "Disbanded," Joseph reported. "The official story is that Mrs. Pratt perished in the mountains, a tragic accident." "And Robert Pratt?" Victoria asked. Joseph's expression grew serious. "He arrived in Jackson 3 days ago asking questions, offering money for information." Owen and Victoria exchanged alarmed glances. "We need to keep moving," Owen said. "California is still a long ride away." That night, as they prepared for bed in the small room Joseph had secured for them, Victoria found herself restless, troubled by thoughts of Robert Pratt hunting them across the frontier. "What kind of life will we have?" she wondered aloud. "Always looking over our shoulders, never able to put down roots." Owen sat beside her on the narrow bed. "Maybe not the life either of us planned, but it can still be a good one. There are remote places in California where no one would find us. We could build something there, together." Victoria studied his face, the strong lines now so familiar, the eyes that had seen so much pain yet still held warmth when they looked at her. "Together," she repeated, liking the sound of it. "But Owen, what are we to each other? Companions in flight." "Friends, more than friends, I think," he said softly, taking her hand. "If you want that," Victoria's heart quickened. "I do, but what? In the eyes of the law, I'm still Malcolm Pratt's wife," she said. "Even though he's dead, I haven't been properly widowed." "There would always be questions." Owen considered this. "Then we'll create new lives, new names, a fresh start in every way." "Is that enough for you?" Victoria asked. "Living under false names, pretending to be something we're not." "The only thing that matters is what's real between us," Owen said, his voice low and certain. "The rest is just details." He kissed her then, a kiss that promised a future neither of them had dared to imagine just weeks ago. Victoria responded with a passion that surprised them both, the last of her hesitation falling away as they came together in the darkness. Morning brought renewed determination. With Joseph's help, they secured new supplies, including a second horse for Victoria. They said their goodbyes, promising to send word once they were settled in California. "There is a place," Joseph told them, marking a crude map. "In the northern mountains near the coast. My people traded with tribes there long ago. The forests are deep, the valleys hidden. A good place to disappear." As they prepared to depart, Billy approached Victoria shyly. "Mrs. Pratt, I mean, madam," he stumbled. "I just wanted to say I'm glad you got away. Mr. Pratt wasn't a good man. Everyone knew it, but nobody did nothing." Victoria squeezed the young man's hand. "Thank you, Billy, for everything." The journey to California took them another month, a month of hard travel, occasional dangers, and growing closeness. They skirted settlements when possible, but sometimes had to risk entering small towns for supplies. In these places, they posed as a married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, traveling to join family in California. Each night spent under the stars, each obstacle overcome together, strengthened the bond between them. Victoria discovered a resilience in herself she'd never known existed, while Owen slowly shed the armor of grief he'd worn for so long. By the time they reached the northern California mountains Joseph had described, autumn was painting the forests in gold and crimson. They found a hidden valley with a clear stream running through it, meadows for horses, and enough timber to build a cabin before winter set in. "This is it," Owen said as they stood on a ridge overlooking their new home. "What do you think?" Victoria took in the peaceful valley, the distant shimmer of the Pacific Ocean beyond the coastal mountains, the endless sky above. "It's perfect." They built their cabin in a clearing near the stream, working from dawn till dusk. Owen's experience with his previous homestead proved invaluable, while Victoria learned quickly, her delicate hands growing calloused and strong. As the walls rose log by log, they spoke of the future of breeding horses in this hidden valley, of perhaps one day having children, of creating a life that was truly their own. On a crisp October morning, with the cabin nearly complete and the first dusting of snow on the distant peaks, Owen rode to the nearest settlement, a small coastal town some 20 miles away. He returned with supplies, news of the outside world, and something unexpected, a simple gold ring. That night, under a canopy of stars, Owen knelt before Victoria with the ring in his hand. "I know we can't have a proper ceremony," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But in my heart, in all the ways that matter, I want you as my wife. Victoria, will you marry me? Not as Smith or Young or Pratt, but as us, just us, building something real in this new place." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "In all the ways that matter, yes." They exchanged vows with only the wilderness as witness, placing the ring on Victoria's finger as a symbol of a promise that needed no church or judge to validate it. Winter came and went, the small cabin warm with their love and shared dreams. Spring brought new growth to the valley and news that Victoria was carrying a child, a miracle neither had dared hope for. They were working in the small garden beside the cabin when Victoria saw them 3 riders approaching slowly from the east. She froze, her hand instinctively moving to protect her swollen belly. "Owen," she called, her voice tight with fear. He was at her side instantly, rifle in hand, scanning the approaching figures. Then, unexpectedly, he lowered the weapon, a smile spreading across his face. "It's Joseph," he said incredulously. "And Billy." And the third rider came into focus, a woman with a familiar face that Victoria had seen only in a faded photograph. "Catherine," Victoria whispered, confusion washing over her. Owen shook his head, still staring in disbelief. "Her sister." "Elizabeth, I'd forgotten Joseph knew her." They watched as the riders drew closer. Joseph raised his hand in greeting, his weathered face creased in a rare, broad smile. "I bring news," he called as they approached. "And family." Elizabeth dismounted, first a striking woman with the same delicate features as her sister, but with a determined set to her jaw that was all her own. She approached Owen cautiously. "Joseph found me in Denver," she explained. "Told me you were alive, that you'd made a new life. I had to see for myself." Owen embraced her, emotion evident in every line of his body. "It's good to see you, Elizabeth. Catherine would be glad you're here." Elizabeth turned to Victoria, taking in her pregnant state with a warm smile. "And you must be Victoria. Joseph has told me so much about you." As they shared a meal around the fire that evening, Billy regaled them with tales of his new life with Joseph's people, learning their ways, finding acceptance. "And Robert Pratt?" Victoria finally asked, the question that had lingered in her mind. Joseph's expression turned solemn. "Dead, thrown from his horse outside Denver 3 months ago. No one mourned." Victoria felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the last shadow of her past life finally banished. She leaned against Owen, his arms strong around her. "You're truly free now," he said softly. "Both of us are." As the fire burned low and their guests settled into the small bunkhouse Owen had built for visitors, Victoria stood in the doorway of their cabin, gazing at the star-filled sky. Owen joined her, his hand coming to rest on the swell of their child. "What are you thinking?" "About the road that brought us here," she said. "About how something terrible led to something beautiful." "Like a forest after a fire," Owen observed, "new growth from ashes." Victoria turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the beloved lines of his face. "When I was running from that lynch mob, I thought my life was over. I never imagined I was running toward something better, toward you." Owen kissed her gently, reverently. "From the moment I saw you on that road, I knew we were meant to find each other. 2 broken pieces making something whole." They stood together in the doorway of their home, the valley stretching before them, full of promise. Behind them lay ghosts and grief, violence and loss. But ahead was life, their life, hard-won and precious. A year later, Owen stood in that same doorway, watching Victoria rock their son James in the afternoon sunlight. The valley had flourished under their care, with a small herd of horses grazing in the meadow and vegetable gardens surrounding the cabin. Joseph visited regularly, bringing news and supplies from the outside world. Billy had married a girl from Joseph's tribe and started his own horse trading business. Elizabeth had settled in the coastal town, opening a small school where James would one day learn his letters. They had created not just a homestead but a family, bound not by blood or law but by choice and love. Their names and pasts were known only to those they trusted most. To everyone else, they were simply the young couple who bred the finest horses in the northern mountains. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Victoria would remember the terror of that day, the lynch mob at her heels, death seemingly inevitable. And then she would look at Owen, at their son, at the life they had built together, and marvel at how a moment of desperation had led to a lifetime of joy. The lynching party had been coming for her. A cowboy had stood in the road and said, "Turn around." And in that moment, everything had changed. Not an ending, but a beginning, the first step on a journey neither could have imagined, a journey that had led them home,